Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing my 2020 wrap-up #1. I'm gonna go back to doing videos where I wrap up like every 5 books that I read. That way it's a little bit more low pressure for me because I'm not trying to like finish a certain amount by the end of the month, and I'm able to just kind of film whenever it fits into my schedule instead of being like, I need this weekend to be free. And also it'll allow me to go a little bit more in depth about those 5 books that I talk about. Before I get started, I just want to let you guys know that I am also making it a goal that I'm writing Goodreads reviews for every single book that I read, so you can also follow me on Goodreads to see reviews there. But yeah, that's something that I am planning on keeping up with this year because I was really bad about it the last like 2 years and I want to get back into that. So the first book that I read in 2020 was a real big disappointment for me, and that was Normal People by Sally Rooney. I was so curious about it because so many people listed it as one of their favorite books of last year, and I really wanted to adult books and just books that are kind of outside of my comfort zone more of a chance this year. I got this one out from the library. I'm so glad that I didn't buy it because I hated it. I know that this is going to be a very, very unpopular opinion, but I ended up giving this book 1 star, which is like unheard of for me. There are like very few books that I've given 1 star, but this was one of them. The reason that I don't give many 1 stars to books is because if I'm really not enjoying something, I'm likely just going to DNF it instead of powering through to the end. But because so many people love this one, I was like, I'm not going to give up. Like, what if something changes toward the end? It'll change my whole opinion of the book. That didn't happen. For myself, I was like, I want to finish this full thing, and then also I can talk about why I didn't like it thoroughly. The 2 positive things that I do have to say about it is that I did like the style of storytelling. It was interesting that the author would tell you something that was happening in the present moment, like at the beginning of a chapter. You would be like, wait a second, how did we get there? And then after seeing this one scene of interactions, she would go back and do a flashback and show you what happened leading up to that point. So it was kind of like you never knew where the characters were going to be when you had that next in the present moment. She also didn't use any quotation marks, which didn't bother me, but I've heard that that bothered other people. But I thought it was pretty obvious like when something was dialogue, even though there weren't any quotation marks. And secondly, I do feel like there were some interesting observations about adolescence and the kind of like embarrassment that you can feel as a teenager, and the way that things change between high school and college, and the way that your self-confidence can shift, and just the way that people view you can shift now that you're not with this group of people that have known you your whole life. But that is where my pros end. So ultimately, I thought that this book was incredibly boring. I never got on board for the relationship between our 2 main characters, Marianne and Connell. To me, a lot of their interactions felt very matter-of-fact, and some of the things that Marianne forgave Connell for, I couldn't get past the way that he treated her when they were in high school, so that was like kind of rough to see. There was also a huge lack of plot. It was definitely like a slice of life kind of novel where we're just seeing these characters go from high school to college and then potentially what's going to happen next. It was like work for myself to push through. Every time that it was time for me to read, I was like, I'm not looking forward to reading, but I have to just do it because then I can finally read something new. And I also thought that a lot of the side characters were very underdeveloped. Overall, this book was a huge waste of my time, unfortunately. I feel like I read a completely different book than everyone else read because so many people seem to love it, but it just wasn't for me, and I'm definitely not gonna give Sally Rooney another try. I think I'm kind of done here, and I probably won't even watch the Hulu adaptation because I have such bad memories of my time reading this book. So as I said, I ended up giving this one 1 star. Next up, I read Passion on Park Avenue by Lauren Lane. This is the first book in the Central Park Pact series. There's going to be 3 of them. I think the 3rd one is actually coming out on January 28th, so the series will be completed soon. I'm definitely going to continue on and read books 2 and 3 in the series. I actually ended up ordering the 2nd one right as I was getting to the end of this one because I was enjoying it so much. I found this one to be really quick and really engaging, but I will say that Lauren Lane is known as a romance author, and I picked this up expecting it to be a romance novel, and it really wasn't. It really read more like women's fiction, which I totally love, so it ended up working out for me. But if you're looking for like something very steamy, this is not going to be it. This book ended up making me feel nostalgic for my college years because it reminded me of the books that I used to devour back then, like Candace Bushnell and Plum Sykes and Sophie Kinsella and like those kinds of books. And this book follows a girl named Naomi who grew up very poor in the Bronx, and then she got a taste of what it was like to live on the Upper East Side on Park Avenue very briefly when she was younger, but she ultimately ended up getting plunged back into poverty, and Naomi ended up starting a really successful business. She completely turned her life and her situation around, and she has become like a billionaire essentially, and she's just like a badass CEO, and she's super awesome. She ends up getting the opportunity to move into the building that she lived in on the Upper East Side when she was a child. She ends up taking the apartment. You find out exactly why she does so as the story unfolds. There's a lot going on there. One of the fun things about this book is that in the beginning, Naomi ends up meeting her two best friends in a very unconventional way, but I really liked the way that it happened because there was definitely the opportunity for these three women to turn into instant enemies, and instead they ended up becoming the best of friends and supporting each other and really caring for each other. In her new building, Naomi's living next door to a guy named Oliver Cunningham, and there's a lot more going on in his story than first meets the eye. He's the primary caretaker for his father, who is suffering from Alzheimer's, and Naomi is just immediately mean to him, and the way that their relationship unfolds is wildly entertaining. And I also really loved the Anne of Green Gables references, and there was definitely like a lot of will they won't they tension between the two of them. Also, I really love this book cover, and I also really enjoyed that the book was set in New York City. Trying to read more books set in the city this year. I will say that I did feel like the ending was a little bit rushed, and I did want to see more of the relationship between Naomi and Oliver explored, but I'm hoping that we'll get cameos from them in the second one and kind of get to know more of what's going on. So I ended up really enjoying this one, and I gave it 3.5 stars. Next up is super random, but I ended up reading Beautiful Creatures by Kami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. Me, Alexa, Rachel, and DJ started a paranormal book club. We started it last year, but we kind of like failed with it, so we're trying again this year. And the first book that we decided to read was Beautiful Creatures. I was actually the one that picked this one because I got this copy of it from the Strand, and it's one of those books that I just never read, even though I saw it all the time in bookstores. I don't know why I never got to it, but I did really like the movie when I saw it, so I was always curious. I'm really glad that we decided to read it because I ended up really enjoying it. So one of the most refreshing elements of this story, especially for the time when it was published, is that instead of being told from the girl's perspective, like the girl who's kind of pining after the guy who is a vampire or a werewolf or whatever kind of supernatural being they might be, this story is actually told from the male perspective. Our main character is Ethan, and he's actually the one that is powerless. So he meets this new girl, Lena, who moves to town, and he has an instant connection with her because he's been having dreams about this girl, and it turns out that Lena is the one that has been in his dreams. They're trying to uncover the mysteries going on kind of behind why they've been having these dreams, and I really liked that Ethan had to be very reactive to everything that Lena was doing. He wasn't really the one that was faced with tough decisions or the impending doom of Lena's 16th birthday. The two things that I love most about this book are the lore of the casters that I found to be really, really interesting. And the second thing is I absolutely loved the setting. It was this like southern gothic town, and I really loved some of the side characters. I felt like everyone was really well developed, but my favorite was definitely Lena's Uncle Macon. And the one thing that I wasn't totally sold on was the romance between the two characters, because while Ethan was definitely pining after Lena, Lena was definitely more focused on her future and what was going to happen to her once her birthday hit. She kind of kept dismissing Ethan and being like, there's no point in even dating because I don't know where I'm going to be, so just like leave me alone. But I am looking forward to seeing how it'll develop in future installments because I'm definitely going to continue reading the series. I really enjoyed the first one. It's not perfect. There definitely are some flaws within it, but I felt like it held up really well, and I was definitely very engaged while I was reading it. And I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The next book I read is The Idea of You by Robin Lee. It's kind of like a form of fan fiction. It's, I think, heavily inspired by the band One Direction, and the main character Hayes is supposed to be like Harry. I don't really know too much about One Direction, so I didn't have that connection to it that other people might have going into it. Our main character, Solène, actually ends up meeting Hayes when her daughter wins an opportunity to go to Vegas and meet the members of August Moon, which is the band that he's in, which is the band that's basically like One Direction. So he ends up seeing her there and feeling an instant attraction, and from there, the two of them develop a relationship and kind of travel all over the world to be with one another. It's definitely an unconventional age gap romance because the female is the one that she's 39 and 40 within the book, and Hayes is 19 to 20 during the time that they're together. It's not something that you typically see, and I thought that the way that it examined social media and the way that older women are treated in society versus the way that older men are treated in society, I thought it had really good insight on all of that stuff and like the way that an older woman is valued versus the way that a younger woman or an older man is valued. But I will say that before I started reading it, the book was like very highly hyped to me. So I didn't enjoy it, I think, as much as I would have if I hadn't had such high expectations. This is definitely like a new adult novel, so know that going into it. Oh, and I also really liked how it talked about kind of the difference between someone's true self versus the idea of oneself, because people have all of these expectations and all of these like preconceived notions about the different members of the band, but they're just like normal people that want to live their lives, but they can't. Everyone expects him to be a certain way, and he kind of has to live up to that while he's out. He's never like really off, except for those alone moments that he has with Solène. I did think that Celine's choice to follow her heart and reclaim her sexuality were very empowering. However, I didn't agree with some of the decisions that she made, and I also had some mixed feelings about the ending of the book, but I obviously won't give that away here. So I did really enjoy it. It read really quickly. I do think that if you are someone that enjoys One Direction, you'll probably get more out of it than I did, but I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. And then the final book that I'm going to talk about today, and my first 5-star read of the year, was Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. This was amazing. I loved it so much. We're following two main characters named Pepper and Jack, and each of them runs the social media account for their parents' restaurants. Pepper's family owns a like corporate burger chain that's kind of like Burger King or McDonald's. Jack's family owns a deli in the East Village that has been around for years. So Big League Burger ends up announcing that they're adding a new grilled cheese to their menu. Seems like they might have stolen the recipe from this tiny deli. So Pepper and Jack end up getting into a Twitter war with one another, but neither of them knows that the other one is running those accounts. And while that's happening, they're becoming each other's biggest like online nemesis. They're also falling for each other in real life as well as on an anonymous chat app that Jack has developed that's used by a lot of the students at their prep school. So it's kind of like a You've Got Mail situation. So Pepper's constant baking, she runs a baking blog with her sister Paige, was making me so hungry, and the creations that she would come up with were so good, and I love how she named everything. And I thought that the writing style in this one just worked for me so well. It's modern and addicting and quick-witted, but it also really strikes a balance with its heartwarming moments. Pepper and Jack both really just jumped off the page for me. They seemed so real, and they seemed like someone that I would interact with in my everyday life. I also really liked how well developed all of the side characters were. And in addition to the romance between the two of them, which I was obviously really rooting very strongly for, I also really loved all of the familial relationships and the dynamic between Jack and his brother, and Pepper and her sister, and Pepper and her mom, and Jack and his parents. I just thought the whole thing was so well done. And even Pepper's like frenemy at school, like everything about this was just so perfect to me. It just 100% kept me hooked, and it was such a cute, fun rom-com, and I really want Netflix to adapt to this because I loved it, and I think that anyone else who reads it will love it too. All of my friends who have read it have also had the same exact feelings as me. I think pretty much everyone I know either gave it 4.5 or 5 stars. I don't know anyone that rated it lower because it really was that good. As I said earlier though, I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I loved it. So those are all of the books that I'm going to be talking about here today. Let me know if you've read any of the ones that I've mentioned, and I will see you guys the next time I read 5 books. Bye!